What if everything you thought you knew about Prince Harry's marriage was a lie? A shocking betrayal, kept in secret for months, now exposed. In an explosive twist, Prince Harry has uncovered the devastating truth. Meghan Markle has been secretly meeting with multiple high-profile divorce attorneys, both in LA and New York, long before the public tension between them even started. Emails and hidden messages confirm it all. Harry was being kept in the dark. Feeling deeply betrayed and used, Harry has made a drastic decision, booking a private flight back to London. But what led to this shocking moment? Why did Meghan hide these meetings from him? And what does this mean for their future? In the next few minutes, we'll reveal everything you need to know about the truth that has rocked the royal family to its core. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Prince Harry's life has always been one of immense public interest, but the narrative surrounding him has taken some unexpected turns over the years. From his early days in the spotlight, navigating the weight of being the second son of the British monarchy, to his marriage to Meghan Markle, a woman who seemed to shatter every rule of royal tradition. The story of Harry's life has been one of both love and controversy. The world watched as they defied expectations, moved to the United States, and eventually distanced themselves from the royal family in a way that no one could have predicted. But just when it seemed like Prince Harry's narrative had finally settled into a new chapter, one of personal freedom and a growing family, the shocking truth about Meghan Markle's private life came crashing into the public eye. It's a truth so unexpected, so dramatic, that it has the potential to reshape everything Harry thought he knew about his wife. It's a truth that, according to multiple sources close to the couple, has left the Duke of Sussex devastated and feeling more betrayed than he ever thought possible. The shocking revelation? Meghan Markle, his wife, the mother of his children, had been secretly consulting with high-profile divorce attorneys in Los Angeles and New York for months, long before the public tensions in their marriage ever became apparent. Imagine, for a moment, the pain and confusion that would follow such a discovery. Harry, once blissfully in love with Meghan, finds himself confronted with the stark reality that his marriage was not as it seemed. Behind the scenes, Meghan had been quietly plotting an exit strategy. Emails and hidden messages detailing consultations with top-tier divorce lawyers sent Harry into a whirlwind of emotion and disbelief. How had he not seen it coming? How had he missed the signs? This revelation didn't just come as a shock. It was a deep cut into the very core of their relationship. For Harry, it felt like a betrayal of the highest order. Meghan, the woman who had once seemed to promise a new beginning, a fresh start, was now something entirely different in his eyes. The shock of it all was overwhelming. It wasn't just the fact that Meghan had been exploring divorce options, it was the fact that she had been doing so without Harry's knowledge or consent. The trust between them, the very foundation of their marriage, had been shattered. The world was left wondering, how could this happen? After all, Harry and Meghan had made such a public display of their love. Their wedding was broadcast for the world to see, and the couple became the poster children for a modern royal relationship, one built on mutual respect, love, and shared ideals. But as we now know, appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the glossy surface of their public lives, a different, more complicated story was unfolding. One that would not remain hidden for long. And so, Prince Harry found himself at a crossroads. The discovery of Meghan's secret meetings with divorce attorneys was a turning point in their relationship, one that he could not ignore. The realization hit him hard. His marriage, the one he thought would be his foundation, his stability in a world of uncertainty, was on the brink of collapse. The emotional toll was immediate. Harry, feeling betrayed and crushed by the weight of the truth, made a decision that would leave the world in shock. In a moment that shocked the public, Prince Harry booked a private flight back to London, just as Meghan continued to live her life in California. For those close to Harry, it was clear, this wasn't just another marital dispute. This was the culmination of months of tension, distrust, and emotional upheaval. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, and Harry was determined to make it a chapter on his terms. This was not a decision Harry took lightly. For someone so deeply connected to his family, returning to London represented not just an emotional escape, but a return to his roots. But it also signified something much more profound. The man who had left behind the royal family to carve his own path was now seeking solace and answers from the institution he had once tried to distance himself from. But what drove Meghan to take such drastic steps? Why had she been consulting with divorce attorneys behind Harry's back? What had happened behind closed doors that led to this moment of utter betrayal? To understand this shocking twist in their relationship, we must first look at the circumstances that led up to Harry's discovery and examine the hidden world of Meghan Markle that the public was not privy to. For months, Meghan had been navigating the complex world of divorce law, meeting with some of the most influential lawyers in both Los Angeles and New York. These meetings were not casual. They were deeply serious, with Meghan reportedly discussing terms, settlement possibilities, and the future of her family, her children, her career, and her future without Harry. It's a reality that was unknown to Harry, and when the truth came to light, it rocked him to his core. But why did Meghan feel the need to do this in secret? Was she truly unhappy in her marriage? Or was there something more behind her actions? Had she been influenced by external pressures? Or was this simply the result of an underlying tension that had been building for years, unnoticed by the public, but felt deeply by both parties? The answers to these questions are complex, and understanding them requires a deeper look into the psychology of both Meghan and Harry, as well as the dynamics of their marriage. For Harry, the discovery of Meghan's actions was not just a betrayal of trust. It was a moment of realization that his entire perception of his wife and their marriage had been shattered. The woman he had once believed to be his partner in every sense was now someone he could no longer trust. This is where the true drama of their story begins. The discovery was not just the end of a relationship. It was the beginning of a personal transformation for Harry. Faced with the brutal truth of Meghan's secret life, Harry was forced to come to terms with a reality that he never imagined. His emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, all collided as he processed the magnitude of what had transpired. But one thing became clear: his life would never be the same again. The moment Harry boarded that private flight back to London, the world was left to wonder, what would happen next? Would this be the end of Harry and Meghan's marriage? Or could they somehow rebuild what had been broken? The stakes were higher than ever, and the drama was only just beginning. But one thing is for certain: Prince Harry's return to London marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. A chapter that, like the one before it, would be filled with public scrutiny, personal struggles, and, perhaps, even more surprising revelations. What does the future hold for Harry, for Meghan, and for their family? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: this is far from over. The story of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle is one that has captivated the world since the moment their relationship became public. Their whirlwind romance, filled with a fairy tale-like wedding and a promise of change, was a symbol of hope to many who longed for a new era in the royal family. At first glance, it seemed as though they had found happiness in each other. Meghan, an American actress, and Harry, a prince of one of the most famous families in the world, were seen as the perfect match, a modern couple with a shared commitment to social justice and philanthropy. Their engagement, followed by the royal wedding in 2018, was a spectacle watched by millions, showcasing a fairy tale romance. Meghan, the first woman of mixed race to marry into the British royal family, was hailed as a breath of fresh air. Their union felt symbolic of a new age for the monarchy, one that was moving away from old traditions and embracing diversity and modernity. Harry and Meghan's early days together were filled with charity work, travel, and public appearances that highlighted their shared passion for humanitarian causes. They took on causes ranging from mental health awareness to gender equality, and many saw their marriage as a beacon for progress. The media buzzed with excitement over their ability to break barriers, not just as royals but as two individuals who were genuinely committed to making a difference in the world. But as their relationship evolved, so did the challenges they faced. Initially, their dynamic seemed like a breath of fresh air for the royal family. Harry, who had always been known for his more rebellious nature, appeared to have found someone who not only shared his vision but could challenge the traditions he had long felt confined by. Meghan, with her independent spirit and modern views, was seen as the perfect match for Harry, especially given his struggles with the rigid constraints of royal life. However, the harmony they appeared to share was not to last. Behind the scenes, as their public profile grew, so did the pressure on their relationship. The media scrutiny, which had once been a symbol of their popularity, began to feel like an unrelenting force. Harry, who had spent much of his life in the public eye, now found himself deeply frustrated by the constant media invasion into his personal life, particularly when it came to Meghan. The relentless paparazzi, the negative press, and the constant invasions of their privacy started to take their toll. For Meghan, the pressure was even greater. As an American actress with a successful career, She had never been accustomed to the level of scrutiny that comes with being part of the British royal family. Her every move, her every word, was dissected and criticized, often in ways that seemed unfair or unjust. The constant comparison to her late mother-in-law, Princess Diana, was another source of stress. Meghan felt like she could never escape the shadow of Diana, with the media drawing constant parallels between their lives, often casting her in a negative light. As Harry and Meghan's frustrations grew, so did the public's fascination with their relationship. What had once seemed like the perfect fairy tale marriage now appeared to be unraveling. The couple began to distance themselves from the royal family, stepping back from official royal duties and making public statements that hinted at their desire for more autonomy. Their decision to move to the United States in 2020 was seen as a bold move, one that allowed them to escape the constant media circus surrounding them. But even as they took steps to create a new life for themselves, the underlying tensions in their marriage began to surface. The couple's publicized exit from royal duties, their interviews, and their public statements hinted at deeper issues within the relationship. Many speculated that Meghan's adjustment to royal life had been more difficult than anyone realized, and that Harry, who had spent his entire life in the royal spotlight, was struggling to reconcile his duty with his desire for privacy and independence. While the couple tried to present a united front, their personal issues were becoming increasingly evident. The media, eager to find cracks in their relationship, fueled rumors and speculation about their marriage. Meghan's strained relationship with the royal family, particularly with her father, Thomas Markle, and her half-sister, Samantha Markle, added to the public's perception of a fractured personal life. Many wondered if the pressures of royal life had driven a wedge between Harry and Meghan, and whether the strains of their high-profile marriage were taking a toll on their personal happiness. As Harry and Meghan struggled with their own issues, they faced additional challenges from within the royal family. The British monarchy, with its centuries-old traditions, had a difficult time adjusting to the couple's new way of life. Harry's brother, Prince William, and other senior members of the royal family were reportedly concerned about the couple's decision to step away from their royal duties, fearing that it would undermine the monarchy's authority and unity. The tension between Harry and William became more evident, with reports of growing discord between the two brothers. The media capitalized on these tensions, creating a narrative of a rift within the royal family, which only added to the pressure Harry and Meghan were already feeling. Yet, despite these mounting challenges, no one could have anticipated the bombshell that would eventually come to light. Behind closed doors, Harry and Meghan were grappling with far more than just the stress of public life. While the media was fixated on their public appearances and statements, there were darker forces at play behind the scenes. The cracks in their relationship, once subtle and unnoticed by the public, were beginning to widen. The discovery of Meghan's secret meetings with divorce attorneys would shatter the illusion of the couple's happy marriage. But before we can fully understand the depth of this betrayal, we must look at the events that led to this moment of realization for Harry. It wasn't just a series of public incidents or media scrutiny that caused the strain in their relationship. It was the deep-seated personal issues that neither of them had fully addressed. Meghan's decision to consult with divorce lawyers was not made overnight. It was a culmination of months, if not years, of unresolved tension. It's important to recognize that these were not decisions made out of the blue, but the result of complex personal dynamics, emotional exhaustion, and external pressures. In this chapter, we begin to see how, despite their seemingly perfect exterior, Harry and Meghan were already walking on a fragile tightrope. And as we dig deeper, we'll uncover how the tension between them reached a breaking point, leading to the ultimate betrayal that would change everything. As Harry and Meghan's relationship began to show signs of strain, the public largely remained unaware of the brewing storm beneath the surface. For months, Meghan had been meeting with high-profile divorce attorneys in both Los Angeles and New York. These were not casual consultations, but serious, deliberate discussions about the future of her marriage. Harry, once deeply in love with Meghan and confident in their bond, had no idea that these secret meetings were taking place. It wasn't until a series of hidden messages and emails were uncovered that the full extent of the betrayal became clear. The discovery came at a time when Harry was already struggling to balance his public duties, his family's expectations, and his growing personal frustration. The weight of the royal family's scrutiny, combined with Meghan's own challenges adjusting to royal life, created an underlying tension that neither of them fully addressed. The public's interest in their marriage, while often portrayed as admiration, was actually a constant pressure that neither of them had anticipated. Meghan's struggle with the press was well documented, but it wasn't just the media's treatment of her that weighed heavily on their relationship. It was the constant tension, the constant feeling of being watched, that eroded the trust between them. During this period, Meghan began to take steps that would ultimately lead to her consulting with divorce lawyers. But this was not the act of a woman who had simply made a sudden decision. It was the result of a long period of quiet deliberation, emotional strain, and a desire for independence. These meetings with divorce attorneys were not just about ending her marriage. They were about creating a path for her future. A future that, at that moment, no longer seemed to include Harry. The attorneys she met with were some of the best in their field, and their expertise wasn't focused solely on the logistics of a divorce. Meghan's conversations with these lawyers covered everything from asset division to custody arrangements for their children. There was a level of preparation and planning in these meetings that was almost surgical in its precision. Meghan wasn't just looking for a quick escape. She was carefully strategizing for a life after Harry, one that would secure her independence, her financial stability, and her personal freedom. But as careful as Meghan had been in her consultations, she didn't anticipate that Harry would eventually uncover the truth. The emails and messages detailing her meetings were, at first, hidden. Meghan thought she had covered her tracks well, but the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when you least expect it. Harry, while going through some personal files on his phone, stumbled upon a thread of messages that would change everything. At first, they appeared to be nothing more than routine conversations. But as he dug deeper, he began to see patterns that led him to a series of emails with divorce attorneys. The discovery was not immediate. Harry, initially unsure of what he was seeing, revisited the messages, rereading them with growing confusion and disbelief. The first email he read was a simple one, confirming an appointment with a well-known divorce lawyer in Los Angeles. At first glance, it could have been interpreted as a professional inquiry, perhaps just a routine question, Harry thought. But as he read further, the tone of the conversation became more alarming. Meghan wasn't simply inquiring about divorce. It seemed she was already laying the groundwork. The second email was more direct. It was a detailed exchange about custody arrangements, specifically concerning their 2 children. There was talk of what was in the best interest of the children, and an inquiry into Harry's willingness to negotiate certain terms. The lawyer had asked Meghan to outline what she hoped to achieve through a divorce settlement. At that moment, Harry's heart sank. The idea that Meghan had been discussing the future of their children without him, that she had been planning an exit strategy for months, was a betrayal that cut to the core. As Harry continued to read, the full extent of Meghan's actions began to unfold. There were multiple consultations with different attorneys, each one more explicit about the next steps in the process. They spoke of financial matters, private settlements, and even potential public statements. Meghan was planning her future without Harry, and all the while, he had no idea. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, overwhelming him with confusion, hurt, and a deep sense of betrayal. How had Meghan been able to keep this a secret? How had she managed to maintain such a facade of a happy, united family while, behind closed doors, she was planning to leave it all behind? The questions raced through Harry's mind, each one more painful than the last. But as painful as it was to process, the truth was undeniable. Meghan had been actively seeking a divorce long before the public tensions between them had escalated. The fact that Meghan had kept these meetings from Harry, her husband, was not just a betrayal of their marriage, it was a betrayal of everything they had built together. It shattered the illusion of their partnership and left Harry questioning everything about their relationship. He had always believed in their love, in their shared goals and ideals. But now, he was faced with the painful truth that Meghan had been preparing to walk away from him long before the world knew of their struggles. As Harry processed the implications of these emails and messages, he realized that this discovery was not just a turning point in his marriage, it was a turning point in his life. He had always seen himself as someone who could overcome challenges, someone who could fight through difficult times. But this betrayal was different. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a simple conversation or a few heart-to-heart moments. This was a fundamental breach of trust, one that left him questioning not just Meghan's motives, but his own judgment. In the days that followed, Harry tried to make sense of what he had uncovered. He couldn't understand why Meghan had kept this from him, why she hadn't been honest about her intentions. Was she unhappy? Did she no longer love him? Or was there something else at play? These questions haunted him as he attempted to reconcile the woman he had married with the woman who had been meeting with divorce attorneys in secret. It wasn't just the meetings themselves that bothered him. It was the fact that Meghan had been planning her exit strategy with such precision, without ever discussing it with him. For Harry, the betrayal wasn't just about the act of seeking a divorce, it was about the way it had been done. The secrecy, the planning, the careful steps taken behind his back, all spoke to a deeper issue within their relationship. It wasn't just a simple case of a marriage falling apart. It was the realization that Meghan had been preparing to leave him without ever giving him the opportunity to understand her feelings or work through their issues together. Harry's world, already filled with public pressure and personal frustration, was now shattered by the cold reality of his wife's secret actions. The emails, the hidden messages, and the silent planning had turned his marriage into something unrecognizable. Meghan, the woman he had trusted with his heart, had betrayed him in a way that no amount of love could undo. And now, as he stood on the precipice of their future together, he had to face the question that would change everything. What now? It's often said that the first cracks in a relationship are the hardest to detect. The signs are subtle at first, small shifts in behavior, quiet moments of tension, the beginning of emotional distance. In the case of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the early signs of trouble were no different. While the couple had always faced public scrutiny and media pressures, their personal struggles began to emerge in more personal and intimate ways. What had seemed like a fairy tale romance was slowly showing signs of wear, and as much as they tried to hide it, the cracks were beginning to show. The first real indication that something was amiss in their marriage didn't come from a major confrontation or public blow-up. It was in the quiet moments between them, the little exchanges that began to carry weight. They were no longer the carefree couple that had once been photographed laughing and smiling together at charity events or on their vacations. The public image of their happiness remained intact, but behind closed doors, things were starting to shift. For Harry, the changes were difficult to ignore. He had always been the more relaxed of the two, willing to embrace his role as the fun, royal who occasionally stepped outside the lines of tradition. Meghan, on the other hand, was known for her drive and ambition. She was not just content with being a royal, she wanted to make an impact in the world. But as their marriage progressed, Harry began to feel a growing tension between their two worlds. Meghan's ambitions, while admirable, often clashed with Harry's desire for a quieter, more private life. The balance between these two desires began to create a strain that neither of them fully addressed at first. The couple had initially seemed in sync with their vision for the future. They were both passionate about social issues, mental health advocacy, and fighting for equality. But the demands of their royal duties and the constant public attention began to take a toll. Meghan, in particular, struggled with the intense media spotlight, which often turned hostile. The constant barrage of headlines, the scrutinizing eyes of the public, and the negative portrayals of her in the press left Meghan feeling isolated and unsupported. Harry, too, found himself increasingly frustrated with the royal family's expectations, which felt increasingly out of touch with his and Meghan's shared values. Despite their shared passions, there was a growing sense of isolation between them. Harry felt that Meghan didn't fully understand the pressures he faced within the royal family, and Meghan, in turn, began to feel unsupported by Harry as she navigated the challenges of public life. What had once been a relationship built on mutual respect and shared ideals now felt more like a partnership of convenience. The unspoken tension between them began to build, and while they continued to put on a united front, the cracks were slowly widening. In interviews and public appearances, the couple's chemistry still seemed strong, but those who were close to them began to notice the subtle signs of strain. Meghan became more withdrawn during certain engagements, and Harry, who had once been quick to crack a joke or show affection, started appearing more tense and guarded. The public's fascination with their relationship, once seen as a positive, was now adding to the pressure they both felt. Every move they made was scrutinized, every word analyzed, and every glance between them was read for signs of discord. As the months passed, their relationship began to show even more signs of stress. Meghan's efforts to carve out her own identity within the royal family were met with resistance from some quarters. The British royal family, with its rigid traditions and expectations, was not known for embracing modern change. Meghan's outspoken nature and desire to challenge the status quo often led to tension with more traditional members of the royal family. But Meghan's struggles weren't just with the institution, they were also within her marriage. Her desire to make a meaningful impact and break free from the constraints of royal life often put her at odds with Harry, who was more willing to work within the system. For Harry, the growing rift was difficult to understand. He had always believed in the importance of family and tradition, yet he also felt a sense of duty to protect Meghan from the overwhelming pressures of royal life. As their personal issues grew, so did their desire to escape the spotlight. The couple made a bold decision to step back from their royal duties in early 2020, a move that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. But what seemed like a step toward greater independence was, in reality, a symptom of deeper issues within their marriage. Their move to North America was a reflection of their need for space from the constant media attention, but it was also a sign of the growing emotional distance between them. Harry and Meghan's decision to step away from royal duties was seen as a way for them to forge their own path, but it also highlighted the challenges they faced within their marriage. They were no longer just navigating the pressures of royal life. They were navigating the complexities of their relationship, which had begun to feel increasingly strained. During this time, there were moments when it seemed like Harry and Meghan were still trying to make things work. They continued to attend public events together, and their joint projects still seemed promising. But the cracks in their relationship were no longer hidden. Meghan, feeling isolated by the royal family and her new life in the UK, began to distance herself from Harry. Harry, meanwhile, struggled with the idea of losing his family and the responsibilities that came with being a member of the royal family. Their decision to leave the UK and settle in California was more than just a physical move. It was an emotional one. It was a way for them to escape the pressures of royal life, but it was also a way to escape the tension in their relationship. By stepping away from the royal family, they hoped to regain control over their lives and their marriage. But, as time would reveal, this decision would not solve the deeper issues they faced. While the move to the US was framed as a fresh start, it soon became clear that the emotional distance between Harry and Meghan was too great to overcome simply by changing locations. The pressures of public life, coupled with the personal struggles they had been experiencing for months, were starting to take their toll. Their relationship, once filled with hope and promise, was now fraught with uncertainty and tension. As we look back on these early signs of trouble, it's clear that the issues in Harry and Meghan's marriage didn't appear overnight. They were the result of months, if not years, of unaddressed emotions, unmet needs, and conflicting desires. The cracks in their relationship were subtle at first, but as time passed, they grew harder to ignore. The tension that had been building slowly over time would eventually lead to a series of events that would culminate in Harry's devastating discovery. While Prince Harry's emotional journey was marked by confusion and devastation upon discovering the hidden layers of Meghan's actions, it's important to consider the personal struggles that Meghan was facing in her own right. To understand why she sought out divorce lawyers in secret, we must first delve into the complex pressures and challenges she encountered, both personally and within her marriage. Meghan Markle's entry into the royal family was one of the most public and scrutinized events in modern history. An American actress with a successful career, Meghan was not prepared for the intense and often toxic spotlight that came with being married to Prince Harry. The media, who had once adored her, quickly turned on her, bombarding her with negativity and criticism. From allegations of being a social climber to accusations of disrupting the traditional royal structure, the British press and public seemed to focus more on her flaws than her achievements. This relentless attention began to take a heavy toll on Meghan's mental health, leaving her feeling isolated and misunderstood. But the pressure of being scrutinized at every turn was just one part of the equation. As the first mixed-race woman to marry into the British royal family, Meghan's every move was dissected through the lens of racial and cultural expectations. This added layer of scrutiny created a sense of alienation that Meghan struggled to navigate. She found herself constantly having to defend her actions, justify her decisions, and battle the media's portrayal of her as a diva or out of control. Her every public appearance became a battleground, with no room for personal expression without judgment. In addition to the media's unrelenting focus on her, Meghan's relationship with the royal family itself was a source of stress. While Harry was protective of his wife, the pressure of living up to the royal family's expectations proved difficult to navigate. Meghan, who had spent much of her life advocating for women's rights and social causes, was expected to seamlessly fit into a centuries-old institution known for its formality and restraint. Her desire to challenge tradition, whether it was in her fashion choices, her advocacy work, or her approach to charity often clashed with the royal family's more conservative approach. Meghan, in many ways, was trying to redefine what it meant to be a modern royal. But in doing so, she found herself at odds with both the media and her new family. This tension only deepened as she realized the depth of the isolation she felt. Unlike Harry, who had grown up within the royal system and understood its intricacies, Meghan often felt like an outsider. The loneliness and emotional toll of constantly being under the microscope weighed heavily on her, leading to a growing sense of dissatisfaction in her marriage. But there was also a deeply personal layer to Meghan's struggles that few understood. She had spent much of her life feeling like an outsider, first as a mixed-race child in a predominantly white community and later as an actress in Hollywood, where she often felt like she didn't fully belong. Her marriage to Harry, which had initially seemed like an escape from these feelings of isolation, soon became another source of tension. Meghan, for all her achievements and ambitions, was still carrying the weight of her past. The emotional baggage of her childhood, coupled with the ongoing pressure of living in the public eye, was beginning to take a toll on her mental well-being. As the months went by, Meghan found herself questioning whether she could continue in the royal family. Her desire to maintain her independence and autonomy clashed with the restrictive nature of royal life. While Harry had always been supportive, Meghan began to feel as though their relationship was becoming a symbol of everything she was trying to escape from. She wasn't just seeking a way out of her marriage, she was seeking a way out of a life that no longer felt like her own. The decision to consult divorce attorneys was not an easy one for Meghan. It wasn't that she didn't love Harry, but rather that she was struggling to reconcile her personal identity with the life she had married into. Meghan's consultations with top divorce lawyers in Los Angeles and New York were not just about ending a marriage. They were about finding a path to personal freedom and independence. The idea of divorce was not just about leaving Harry. It was about reclaiming her sense of self in a world that had made her feel like she was constantly performing for others. Meghan's desire to seek out divorce lawyers was also rooted in a sense of survival. The pressure on her to conform, to fit into a mold that was never designed for her, had become unbearable. The royal family's expectations, combined with the media's criticism, left Meghan feeling like she had no control over her own life. Her consultations with divorce lawyers were part of a larger plan to regain control of her career, her family, and her future. But while this decision made sense in Meghan's mind, it was the secrecy of it all that would eventually unravel her relationship with Harry. At the heart of Meghan's personal struggles was a desire to be understood, to be seen as more than just a royal wife or a public figure. She wanted to make a meaningful impact on the world, to carve out her own path and advocate for the causes that mattered to her. But this desire for independence and recognition often collided with the constraints of her royal life. Harry, too, had his own set of struggles. He had always fought for his privacy and autonomy. But unlike Meghan, he had been born into the royal family and had grown accustomed to its rules and boundaries. For Meghan, these personal struggles were compounded by the deep emotional toll of constantly feeling like she didn't belong. Despite Harry's support, despite their shared values and dreams, Meghan found herself feeling more alone than ever before. The strain on their marriage grew as Meghan sought ways to find herself outside of the rigid expectations placed on her. While Harry was unaware of the extent of Meghan's private decisions, Meghan's personal struggles were becoming more pronounced with each passing day. She was caught in a cycle of wanting to do good in the world but feeling stifled by the very institution that was supposed to support her. This emotional turmoil was at the root of her decision to secretly meet with divorce attorneys. It was an attempt to break free from a life that felt increasingly foreign to her, but it also highlighted the deep divide between her and Harry, who was still fighting for the family they had built together. The emotional weight Meghan carried, while rarely discussed, played a crucial role in the events that followed. Her desire for personal freedom and emotional autonomy eventually led her down a path she couldn't turn back from. But it wasn't just her personal dissatisfaction that caused her to seek out divorce lawyers. It was also the growing sense of resentment toward a life she felt she had never truly chosen. It was this frustration, this longing for something more, that ultimately pushed her to make the difficult decision that would change the course of her marriage to Harry. The moment that would irrevocably alter the course of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage came not in a heated argument or a dramatic public confrontation, but in a quiet, seemingly insignificant moment that Harry would never forget. It was in the midst of routine tasks, looking through emails, managing personal matters, that Harry stumbled upon something that would shatter everything he had believed about his wife in their life together. It wasn't as though he had been searching for something specific. It was merely a sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right, that prompted him to dig deeper. At first, it seemed like an ordinary email, perhaps an innocuous bit of business or an irrelevant message that could be easily dismissed. But as Harry opened the email and read its contents, his heart began to race. The subject line didn't stand out, but the content inside immediately sent a shockwave through his mind. The email was confirming an appointment with a divorce lawyer in Los Angeles. Harry's first reaction was disbelief. He reread the email, trying to make sense of it, wondering if he had somehow misinterpreted the context. After all, it could have been a mistake, an email meant for someone else, or even a miscommunication. But as Harry continued to read, the pieces began to fall into place, and the implications of what he was seeing became clearer by the second. This was not just an inquiry for advice. This was a serious conversation about legal matters, about a future that no longer seemed to include him. The email detailed a meeting to discuss potential divorce proceedings, including possible custody arrangements and asset division. It was not just about ending a relationship. It was about making plans for a new future, one that involved a complete break from the life they had built together. The more Harry read, the more questions flooded his mind. Why hadn't Meghan said anything to him? Why was she consulting with divorce attorneys behind his back? What had happened to the relationship they had once shared? The initial shock of the discovery left Harry reeling. He didn't know how to process the information or even where to begin in confronting the woman he had loved so deeply, the woman who had become his partner and the mother of his children. It was as though his entire world had been turned upside down in an instant, and he was left to pick up the pieces. But it wasn't just one email that opened the floodgates. It was a series of emails, a trail of correspondence that Meghan had carefully concealed from him. As Harry continued to search through the messages, he discovered more details, appointments with other high-profile attorneys, conversations about settlement terms, and even notes on how to manage the media's reaction to their impending separation. Each new message confirmed his worst fears. Meghan had been planning this for months, and he had been completely in the dark. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, Harry's mind raced with questions and self-doubt. Had he missed the signs? Had he failed to notice the subtle shifts in their relationship, the growing distance between them? He began to wonder if the love he had once shared with Meghan was nothing more than an illusion, a carefully constructed narrative that was now crumbling before his eyes. The pain of betrayal was compounded by the realization that Meghan had kept these plans hidden from him, not even offering him the chance to discuss their issues openly or to work through their problems together. In the days following his discovery, Harry's emotions swung between anger, sadness, and confusion. He tried to make sense of the situation, but no matter how hard he thought about it, the betrayal felt unbearable. Meghan, who had always seemed so supportive and understanding, had been quietly planning her exit. The trust that had once been the cornerstone of their relationship was now shattered beyond repair. For Harry, the idea that his wife had been consulting divorce lawyers in secret, without ever giving him a chance to understand her feelings or address their issues, was a devastating blow. He couldn't help but feel like everything he had worked so hard to protect, their marriage, their family, their future, had been undermined by the very person he trusted the most. But it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the timing. Harry had already been dealing with the pressures of royal life, his family's expectations, and the constant media attention. Now, in the midst of all of this, he was faced with the realization that his marriage was falling apart. The weight of it all was suffocating. He had always felt a deep sense of duty to protect his family, but now it seemed that the very foundation of his personal life was crumbling. He was no longer just dealing with the pressures of his royal duties. He was dealing with the collapse of his marriage and the emotional fallout that came with it. The discovery didn't just affect Harry's emotions, it also prompted him to take immediate action. The pain and shock of the situation made it clear that he couldn't continue living in a state of uncertainty. He needed answers, he needed clarity, and above all, he needed to confront Meghan about what he had discovered. It was no longer about trying to fix things quietly or behind the scenes. It was about confronting the truth head-on, no matter how painful it might be. But as Harry prepared to confront Meghan, he faced another dilemma. How would she respond? Would she deny everything? Or would she admit to the truth that had been hiding in plain sight? Would she try to justify her actions? Or would she offer an apology for the pain she had caused? Harry didn't know what to expect, but one thing was certain. This discovery had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. In the days that followed, Harry began to prepare for the confrontation he knew was inevitable. The man who had once been so protective of his wife, so eager to defend her against the media's criticism, now found himself questioning everything about their relationship. The shock of what he had uncovered was only compounded by the realization that he could no longer ignore the emotional distance between them. Their marriage had reached a breaking point, and the truth could no longer be hidden. As Harry prepared to address the situation, his emotions were a whirlwind. He was hurt, betrayed, confused, and unsure of how to move forward. The man who had once believed in the power of love and commitment now found himself questioning whether any of it was real. The woman he had trusted with his heart and his life had secretly been planning to leave him, and he had been none the wiser. The pain of that realization would linger, but Harry knew that there was no turning back. The truth had come to light, and now they would both have to face the consequences. The moment of truth had arrived. Prince Harry, devastated by the discovery of Meghan's secret consultations with divorce lawyers, knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with his heart, had been planning a future without him. As much as he had tried to avoid it, the painful realization had shattered the illusion of their perfect marriage. The emotional burden of the situation was overwhelming, and Harry found himself at a crossroads. For days, Harry wrestled with his emotions, unable to escape the turmoil inside. The shock of the discovery left him reeling, questioning not only Meghan's intentions but his own role in the relationship. Had he missed the signs? Had he been so blinded by his love for her that he failed to see the cracks in their marriage? These questions gnawed at him, and the weight of betrayal was suffocating. Harry needed to make a decision, but he didn't know how to move forward. It wasn't just the emotional toll that Harry faced. The situation was also complicated by his royal responsibilities. His family, particularly his father, King Charles, had always expected Harry to play a certain role. The royal family's expectations weighed heavily on Harry, but now, more than ever, he was faced with a personal crisis that demanded his attention. The weight of the public's gaze was constant, and Harry knew that any decision he made would be scrutinized by the world. But as the days passed and Harry grappled with the emotional chaos of the situation, one thing became clear: he couldn't stay in California any longer. The pain, the betrayal, and the emotional distance between him and Meghan were too great to ignore. Harry had always been a man of action, someone who didn't shy away from difficult decisions. And now, he was faced with the hardest decision of all. Should he confront Meghan, or should he leave? The idea of confronting Meghan was daunting. Harry had always been protective of her, especially in the public eye. The idea of publicly challenging her, of exposing the cracks in their marriage, felt like an insurmountable task. But at the same time, the emotional weight of the situation demanded resolution. Harry couldn't keep living in a state of uncertainty. The truth had come to light, and it was time to face it head-on. But the confrontation would not be as simple as Harry imagined. The couple's public image, which had once been so carefully crafted, was now in tatters. Any attempt to address their issues would be viewed through the lens of the media's scrutiny, and Harry knew that whatever happened next would be splashed across headlines worldwide. The pressure of this reality was heavy on his shoulders, but it was nothing compared to the emotional burden he was already carrying. In the midst of his internal battle, Harry made a decision that shocked everyone. He booked a private flight back to London. It wasn't a decision made in haste, but one born of necessity. Harry felt that he needed space to process everything that had happened, space to regain his composure, and space to figure out what his future looked like outside of this broken marriage. He couldn't remain in the U.S., surrounded by the memories of his life with Meghan. He needed to go back to his roots, to return to a place where he could think clearly and make sense of what had transpired. The act of booking the flight was symbolic. It wasn't just about physically returning to London. It was about reclaiming a sense of control over his life. For so long, Harry had lived under the shadow of the royal family, constrained by tradition and expectations. But now, he was making a decision that was entirely his own. The pain of leaving Meghan behind was palpable, but Harry knew that he needed to do what was best for him, not for anyone else. The decision to leave wasn't easy. Meghan, who had been his partner, his confidant, and the mother of his children, was now a stranger in many ways. The trust between them had been broken, and the emotional toll of the discovery was too great to ignore. Harry knew that he needed time away to process his feelings and determine whether there was any chance of salvaging their marriage. But at that moment, all he could think about was finding peace, finding clarity, and getting away from the chaos that had become his life. Meghan, when she found out that Harry had booked the flight, was devastated. The realization that Harry was leaving was a wake-up call for her. She had been so focused on her own emotional needs and desires that she hadn't fully realized the depth of Harry's pain. Meghan had always been a woman of independence and ambition, but now, as she faced the collapse of her marriage, she had to confront the reality of the choices she had made. The silence between them was deafening. Harry was no longer the man she had married, the man who had stood by her side through thick and thin. The man who had been her partner in every sense of the word was now walking away, and Meghan had no idea how to stop it. As Harry prepared to board the flight, the weight of the situation hit him. He was about to leave behind everything he had known, his family, his children, and his wife. The future that he had once envisioned with Meghan now seemed impossible. The love they had shared, the dreams they had built together, were now overshadowed by the painful reality of betrayal. Harry's decision to leave wasn't just about escape. It was about survival. He couldn't stay in a marriage where trust had been broken beyond repair. And so, with a heavy heart, he left. The flight to London marked a new chapter for Harry, but it was one filled with uncertainty. He didn't know what the future held or whether he would ever be able to repair his relationship with Meghan. What he did know was that he needed to find a way to heal, to regain his sense of self, and to take control of his future. The pain of leaving Meghan behind was immense, but Harry understood that sometimes, in order to move forward, you have to make the hardest decisions of all. In the coming days, Harry would face the reality of his new life, one that was no longer defined by his marriage to Meghan. The decision to return to London was just the beginning of a journey that would force him to confront his deepest emotions, his sense of duty to the royal family, and the future he would now have to carve out for himself. But for now, as he sat on that private plane, Harry allowed himself a moment of peace. He was no longer running from the truth. He was facing it, and in doing so, he was taking the first step toward reclaiming his life. The news that Prince Harry had booked a private flight back to London was not something Meghan could have anticipated. While the tension between them had been growing, the reality of Harry's departure felt like a punch to the gut. For Meghan, the discovery that Harry was leaving was both a wake-up call and a painful acknowledgement of everything that had gone wrong. In the quiet of their home in California, she found herself grappling with the emotional weight of the situation. For months, Meghan had been navigating the emotional turbulence of their relationship. She had felt isolated and misunderstood, struggling to reconcile her own ambitions and desires with the constraints of royal life. But now, as she stood at the crossroads of her marriage, she had to face the painful truth that Harry was no longer willing to continue the fight. The idea that Harry was walking away, leaving her and their children behind, was something Meghan had not prepared for. Despite the months of emotional distance, despite the private meetings with divorce attorneys, the thought of losing Harry was still a shock to her. When Harry told Meghan about his decision to leave, the confrontation was painful. Meghan, who had spent so long suppressing her own feelings in the hopes of salvaging their marriage, was suddenly confronted with the reality that her decisions had led them to this moment. She had never expected things to unravel so completely, so quickly. The conversations with the lawyers, the hidden plans for a future without Harry, they had all been done in secrecy, but now, faced with the consequences, Meghan could no longer avoid the reality of her actions. The tension that had built up over the past few months came to a head during their conversation. Harry's emotions, already raw from the betrayal he had discovered, were now compounded by the pain of Meghan's reaction. He had always hoped that they would be able to work through their issues together, but now, the reality of their fractured relationship was inescapable. The trust that had once been the foundation of their marriage had been irrevocably broken, and Harry knew that there was no going back. Meghan, for her part, was devastated by the realization that Harry was leaving. Despite her actions, despite her private meetings with divorce lawyers, she had never fully understood the emotional toll of her decisions on Harry. She had been so focused on her own needs and desires, so focused on creating a future for herself, that she had failed to fully appreciate the depth of Harry's love and the sacrifices he had made for her. Now, standing at the precipice of losing him, she was faced with the consequences of her own emotional detachment. The fallout from Harry's decision was swift and intense. As news of Harry's departure spread, the media seized upon the story, sensationalizing every aspect of their relationship. The public's fascination with the royal couple had always been a double-edged sword, and now, as the cracks in their marriage were exposed, the press seemed eager to dig deeper into their personal lives. Meghan, already a target of intense media scrutiny, found herself once again at the center of the storm. The press, eager to assign blame, quickly turned their focus on her. Was she the one responsible for the breakdown of their marriage? Had her actions been the catalyst for Harry's decision to leave? For Meghan, the media's response was a painful reminder of the harsh realities of royal life. No matter how hard she tried to protect her personal life, the public had always felt entitled to know every detail of her relationship. And now, as the world watched, Meghan was left to pick up the pieces of a broken marriage while also facing the relentless pressure of public judgment. She had always been criticized by the media for her perceived ambition, her desire to break free from royal constraints, but now, she was being vilified as the reason for the downfall of one of the most talked-about royal marriages in history. The emotional fallout was also felt by Harry. While he had made the decision to leave, the pain of doing so weighed heavily on him. He had always hoped that Meghan would be his partner, that they would navigate the challenges of life together. But the discovery of her secret plans, coupled with the emotional distance that had grown between them, made it impossible for Harry to continue down that path. The love he once felt for Meghan had been replaced by a deep sense of betrayal, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't ignore the fact that Meghan's actions had led them to this point. As the days passed, Harry's decision to return to London became a reality. The emotional distance between him and Meghan had grown so wide that he felt there was no other choice. While he knew that this would not be the end of their story, there were still children to consider, a future to navigate. He also knew that he needed space to process everything that had happened. London, for Harry, represented a return to his roots, a place where he could think clearly and regain some semblance of control over his life. It was a place where he could focus on himself, away from the emotional chaos that had defined his relationship with Meghan. For Meghan, the aftermath of Harry's departure was filled with confusion and regret. She had never fully realized the emotional cost of her actions until it was too late. The plan to seek a divorce, the consultations with lawyers, had all seemed like a way out, a way to reclaim control over her life. But now, with Harry gone, she was left to face the consequences of her choices. The pain of losing him, the realization that her actions had driven him away, was something she couldn't ignore. But whether or not she was willing to admit it, the damage had been done. In the days that followed, Meghan tried to make sense of everything. She found herself reflecting on her choices, on the path that had led her to this point. She had always been an advocate for women's rights and empowerment, but now, she was faced with the ultimate question. Had she lost sight of her own values in the pursuit of personal freedom? Had her desire for independence led her to sacrifice the one thing she valued most, her family? As the media continued to scrutinize every aspect of their relationship, Meghan and Harry were forced to confront their personal demons. For Meghan, the fallout was both personal and public, and she found herself questioning whether the life she had fought so hard to build was worth the cost of her marriage. For Harry, the pain of betrayal lingered, but so too did the question of whether reconciliation was possible, or whether he would be able to move on from the emotional wreckage that had come to define his life with Meghan. The future, for both of them, was uncertain, but one thing was clear: their marriage, once thought to be a symbol of modern love and change, had been irrevocably altered. Whether or not Harry and Meghan could ever rebuild their relationship, or if they would continue to drift apart, remained to be seen. As news of Prince Harry's departure from California and his return to London spread, the royal family found themselves thrust into the midst of a growing crisis. For months, they had watched from the sidelines as Harry and Meghan's relationship deteriorated. But now, with the official separation looming, they could no longer remain passive observers. The family, known for its centuries-old traditions and carefully curated public image, was faced with a situation that threatened to undermine its stability. It was a family drama of unprecedented proportions, and everyone from King Charles to Prince William was forced to navigate a complex web of emotions, public relations, and personal loyalties. King Charles, as the patriarch of the royal family, had always been a steady and composed figure in public. However, behind closed doors, he was struggling with the fallout from Harry's decision. The relationship between father and son had always been complicated. Charles, despite his best efforts, had never been able to bridge the emotional gap that existed between him and Harry. The death of Princess Diana, Harry's mother, had left a deep wound that had never fully healed, and the years following her passing had only deepened the rift between Harry and the rest of the royal family. Yet, despite their differences, Charles had always hoped that Harry would find peace and stability within the family. Now, with his son returning to London amid a very public marital breakdown, Charles was forced to confront the reality that his hopes for reconciliation might never come to fruition. The royal family had always been under intense scrutiny, but the public nature of Harry and Meghan's struggles had escalated the pressure on all involved. As Harry arrived in London, the media frenzy intensified. Reports about the breakdown of his marriage were everywhere, and the royal family found themselves having to carefully manage the narrative. It was clear that Harry's return was not just about a personal crisis. It had the potential to affect the royal family's image, particularly at a time when they were already grappling with their own internal issues. Prince William, Harry's older brother, found himself in a particularly difficult position. As the heir to the throne, William had always been expected to carry the weight of the monarchy on his shoulders. But now, with his brother's personal drama spilling into the public eye, William was forced to take a more active role in managing the situation. The tension between William and Harry, which had been building for years, had only worsened as the situation unfolded. William, who had always been a more traditional figure within the royal family, struggled to reconcile Harry's desire for independence with the family's need to maintain a united front. There were reports that William and Harry had not been on the best terms for some time, and the public nature of Harry's decision to distance himself from the royal family only seemed to exacerbate the rift between the two brothers. William, according to sources close to the family, felt a deep sense of betrayal. He had always seen himself as the protector of the royal family's legacy, and Harry's decision to go public with their personal struggles was seen as a breach of that trust. The brothers' once close relationship now appeared strained beyond repair, and the royal family's inability to contain the situation made matters worse. As the days passed and the fallout from Harry's departure continued, King Charles was forced to step in. The father-son relationship, already fraught with tension, was now being tested like never before. Charles, in his role as king, had a responsibility to protect the institution, but he also had a personal investment in his relationship with Harry. Yet, even as the crisis deepened, Charles was faced with the uncomfortable reality that he might not be able to fix things this time. In a private meeting with Harry, Charles attempted to reach out, offering his support and urging his son to work through his marital issues. The conversation was reportedly emotional, with Charles expressing his hope that Harry and Meghan could reconcile and heal their relationship. However, Harry, in the wake of the shock and betrayal he had felt, remained distant. His decision to return to London was not just about needing space from Meghan, it was also about seeking solace and understanding from the family that he had once distanced himself from. But despite his desire to reconnect with his father, Harry remained hesitant. The emotional scars from his childhood, particularly the strained relationship with his father, were not easily erased, and Harry had yet to fully confront the deep-seated issues that had long been simmering beneath the surface. For Meghan, the royal family's response to her husband's departure was a bitter pill to swallow. She had always felt like an outsider within the family, and her decision to step back from royal duties had already created a significant rift. Now, with Harry's return to London, Meghan was left to deal with the fallout on her own. There were reports that Meghan was deeply hurt by the way the royal family had reacted to their struggles, feeling as though she had been left to handle the situation alone. She had hoped that the royal family would provide support during this difficult time, but instead, she felt further isolated. The royal family's silence on the matter only seemed to deepen her sense of abandonment. The royal family, for their part, was careful not to publicly address the specifics of Harry and Meghan's personal crisis. The monarchy had always maintained a policy of not intervening in private matters, and despite the public nature of their issues, the family remained tight-lipped. The official statement from Buckingham Palace was neutral, expressing concern for both Harry and Meghan, but offering no details on how the family intended to handle the situation. This decision to stay silent on the matter, however, only added fuel to the fire of public speculation. The media, eager for details, continued to report on every aspect of the couple's relationship, adding layers of drama to an already volatile situation. As Harry settled into his new life in London, the royal family was left to deal with the aftermath of his departure. The fallout from his marriage to Meghan, the tensions with his family, and the growing public scrutiny placed enormous pressure on everyone involved. For Harry, returning to London was a step toward reclaiming some sense of normalcy, but it also represented a new chapter in a life filled with uncertainty and emotional turmoil. The royal family, on the other hand, had to balance the personal struggles of one of its own with the need to maintain the dignity and stability of the monarchy. The questions surrounding Harry's future and the future of his relationship with Meghan would continue to linger, but for now, the royal family was left to manage the aftermath of a crisis that had shaken the very foundation of their public image.